Okay, so we'll start. We'll start with the prayers first. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadapi Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Prangum Langayate Girim Yatkrupatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dina Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Peshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Desha Tarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Yeah, welcome to this class. Very happy to associate with you all. We shall continue with the topic on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. This is the fourth session on this topic. In the first session, we learned about his childhood events and his marriage, etc. In the second session, we learned how he met his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. We learned about his initiation, his business, how he started a movement called League of Devotees in Jhansi, what led to winding of League of Devotees, and also what circumstances led him to renounce his family and move away as a mendicant. In the third session, we covered his interaction with Srimati Sumati Morarji of Scindia Shipping, challenges he faced while arranging his passport, visa, P-form, etc., his journey and hardships while traveling to America in motor vessel Jaladuta, his landing in New York, staying in Butler, Philadelphia, with his sponsor Gopal Agarwal and his wife Sally. They did not seem to be very comfortable with a saffron-clad Swami in their house. They were very concerned. So what if the neighbors asked and what if friends asked uncomfortable questions? So they decided to move him to a YMCA guest house where he would stay at night, and during the day he would preach at Agarwal's house. Then after a month of staying at YMCA, he is moving to New York. He stayed at Mr. Mishra's house, who was a Mayavadi impersonist. Then he moves to stay in 501 and then at 307. He moved to 307 because he wanted light and fresh air. But at 307, there was a theft. And when his typewriter and other things got stolen, he decides to move to a Bowery, where David Allen, his roommate, and was a drug addict, and whose addiction made him leave the place in fear and take shelter at Carl and Eva's residence. Eva, the lady, was not comfortable with the Swamiji at her house, so he decides to move out, and finally he gets to stay at 26 2nd Avenue in New York for preaching. And above that place, there was a accommodation for him to stay. So total, he had to pay some $196 per month for his stay there. So from here, that is where we stopped last. That was week before last. Last week we took a class on how to fill the forms. So this was before that. Today we shall learn about the various temples he made, how his health deteriorated in New York, how he was forced to travel back to India for treatment, and on getting better, traveling back to America. Then subsequently later on, his battle to get the ISKCON land in Juhu, Mumbai, and finally his departure from this planet. Okay, so last time when we stopped, he had moved on to a place called 26 Second Avenue, New York. This place of worship located 26 Second Avenue in the city, county and state of New York was the sole headquarters for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Yet Prabhupada insisted that he was not living at 26 Second Avenue, New York City. His vision was transcendental. His Guru Maharaj had gone out from traditional holy places of spiritual meditation to preach in big cities like Calcutta, Mumbai, Delhi, etc. And yet Prabhupada would say that his spiritual master had not really been living in any of these cities, but was always in Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, because of his absorption in devotion service. The storefront and the apartment had been spiritualized and were now transcendental heaven. All sections of society would come here, he thought, and the whole world would take shelter here, regardless of the race or religion. The place was small, plain, and impoverished as it was. Prabhupada regarded the storefront as a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. It was the world headquarters, a publishing house, a sacred place of pilgrimage, and a center for which an army of devotees would come together and chant the holy names of God in all streets of the world. The entire universe could receive Krishna consciousness from the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which was beginning here. Although he was engaging the boys in cooking and typing, he had a set of devotees who were with him. Prabhupada was not doing any less himself. He himself used to do all this along with them. But for every sincere soul who came forward to ask for service, 100 came who wanted not to serve, but to challenge. Speaking to them, sometimes he would shout, he was shouting and pounding his fist. Prabhupada defended Krishna against the Mayavadi philosophy. This was also his service to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura. He had not come to America to retire. So with the passing of each new day came yet another confirmation that his work and his followers and his challenges would only increase. The Swami's Kirtanas were very high, and the boys would glance at each other with widening eyes and shaking heads as they responded to his chanting, comparing it to their previous drug experience and signaling each other favorably. This is great. It is better than LSD. That they used to say that. Hey man, I'm really getting high on this. And Prabhupada encouraged their newfound intoxication. At noon, the front room became a dining hall, and in the evenings, a place of intimate worship. Prabhupada had kept the room clean and bare. The solitary coffee table against the wall between the two courtyard windows was the only furniture. Daily at noon, a dozen men were now taking lunch here with him. The meal was cooked by Keith. Keith was one of his disciples, who was earliest one who joined him. The meal was cooked by Keith, who spent the whole morning in the kitchen. At first, Keith had cooked only for the Swami. He had mastered the art of cooking dal, rice, and sabji in the Swami's 3-tier boiler, and usually there had been enough for 1 or 2 guests as well. But soon, more guests had begun to gather, and Prabhupada had told Keith to increase the quantity. Keith was cooking lunch in the kitchen as usual, but today Swamiji was standing by the kitchen stove watching his pupil. Keith paused and looked up from his cooking. Swamiji, could I become your disciple? Yes, Prabhupada replied, why not? Your name will be Krishna Dasa. This simple exchange was a first request for discipleship and Prabhupada's first granting of initiation. But there was more to it than that. Prabhupada announced that he would soon hold an initiation. What is initiation, Swamiji? One of the boys asked. And Prabhupada replied, I will tell you later. And next day at now, he said at length, I will tell you what is meant by initiation. Initiation means that the spiritual master accepts the student and agrees to take charge. And the student accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. He paused. No one spoke. Any questions? And when there were none, he got up and walked out. The devotees, all his disciples and devotees who were there, were stunned. What they had just heard him say. For weeks, he had stressed that when anyone claims to be God, he should be considered a dog. My mind just been blown, said Wally. Everybody's mind is blown, said Howard. Swamiji just dropped the bomb. They thought of Keith. Keith was very close to the Swamiji, so they thought of Keith. He was wise, so they consulted Keith, they decided. But Keith was in hospital for some reason. Talking among themselves, they became more and more confused. Swamiji's remark had confounded their judgment. Finally, Wally decided to go to the hospital to see Keith. Keith listened to the whole story, how Swamiji had told them to fast, and how he had read from his manuscript, and how he had said he would explain initiation, and how everybody had leaned forward all ears, and Swamiji had dropped a bomb. The student accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. Any questions? Swamiji had asked softly, and then he had walked out. I don't know if I want to be initiated now, Wally confessed. We have to worship him as God. Keith was of the intelligent type, so he consoles them. When you're already doing that, well, you're already doing that by accepting whatever he tells you, Keith replied, and he advised that they talk over with Swamiji before the initiation. So Wally went back to the temple and consulted Howard, and together they went up to Swamiji's apartment. Does what you told us this morning, Howard asked, mean we are supposed to accept the spiritual master to be God? That means, Prabhupada replies, that means he is due the same respect as God, being God's representative. Prabhupada replied calmly. Then he is not God. That's what they asked. No, Prabhupada said, God is God. The spiritual master is his representative. Therefore, he is as good as God because he can deliver God to the sincere disciple. Is that clear? It was clear. Then during the 2 months at 26 Second Avenue, he had achieved what formerly had been only a dream. He now had a temple, a duly registered society, full freedom to preach, and a band of initiated disciples. He had received no help from his God brothers, no big donations from Indian business magnates, and no assistance from Indian government. But he was finding success in a different way. These were happy days, he said. He had struggled alone for a year. Krishna sent me money, men and money. That's what he felt. And there are a lot of such rallies happening in US, trying to oppose or support some of their say LSD and such habits. So one such rally, it was to be at Love Pageant Rally, it was called, marking California's new law prohibiting the possession of LSD. LSD is a drug. So rally's promoters urged everyone to come to Tompkins Square Park. Although the Swamiji's devotee had nothing to do with LSD laws, they took the rally as another opportunity to popularize the chanting of Hare Krishna. So they went with the Swamiji's blessings, carrying symbols and a homemade tambourine. They all had come together. Now they began clapping and swaying, getting into the chanting as if it was their single purpose. The chanting grew stronger, and after an hour, the group broke into spontaneous dance, joining hands and singing out Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. They skipped and danced together. Hare Krishna had become their anthem, their reason for coming together. They didn't know exactly what the mantra was, but they accepted it as something deep within the soul, a metaphysical vibration. They tuned into it. Even the clown began chanting and dancing. The dance continued, and only the impending dusk brought the Love Pageant rally to a close. The devotees hurried back to Swamiji to tell him all that had happened. He had been sitting at his desk translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. Although he had not been physically present at the Kirtana, his disciples had acted on his instructions. So even without leaving the room, he was spreading the chanting of Hare Krishna. Similar kirtans were held by Swamiji along with the disciples in other parks like Washington Square Park, etc., which were an instant hit. Around September 1966, it was Radhashtami, the appearance day of Srimati Radharani, Lord Sri Krishna's eternal consort. Prabhupada held his second initiation. So he had some few more disciples whom he initiated. So Keith became Kirtanananda, Steve became Satsvarupa, Bruce became Brahmananda, and Chuck became Achyutananda. It was another festive day with a fire sacrifice in Prabhupada's front room and a big feast. Hare Krishna was becoming popular, regular kirtanas in the park, newspaper coverage. Hayagriva called it the Hare Krishna explosion. Hayagriva was one of his disciples. The Lower East Side hippies considered the chanting of Hare Krishna one of the grooviest thing happening, and that the Swami's disciple didn't take LSD didn't seem to affect their popularity. The devotees were accepted as angelic people carrying out the peaceful chanting to others and offering free food and a place to stay. You could get the most interesting vegetarian food free at their place if you went at the right time. And in their storefront on the shelf by the door were books from India. There are a lot of interaction between Prabhupada and his devotees. Some of the typical interaction that happened was there was a long-haired girl who was sitting very close to Swamiji's dais, who was explaining to Swamiji about her experience with chanting. And she had a question. She said, when I'm chanting, I feel a great concentration of energy on my forehead, and then a buzzing comes, and then a reddish light comes. So what is it? Prabhupada says, just keep on chanting. Swamiji replied, it will clear up. Well, what does chanting produce? Someone asked. Chanting produces chanting, he replied. Just as when you are calling the name of your beloved, if there is someone you love very much, then you want to repeat his name again and again. It is out of love. A man spoke without raising a hand from the crowd. But isn't this just kind of hypnotism on sound? Like if I chanted Coca-Cola over and over, wouldn't it be the same? So no, Prabhupada replied, you take any word, repeat it for 10 minutes, you will feel disgusted. But we chant the holy name 24 hours, we don't feel tired. Oh, we feel very new energy. The questions seem more relevant today. The guests had all been chanting in the park, and now they had probing philosophically into what they had experienced. The Swamiji's followers marked this as a victory. What all answers he gave to the questions, they found it to be very convincing, and they found that they marked it as a victory. And they felt some responsibility as hosts and guides for others. Swamiji had asked Kirtanananda to prepare some prasadam for the guests, and soon Kirtanananda appeared with small paper cups of sweet rice for everyone. The chanting process, Prabhupada continued, the chanting process is just to cleanse the mind, said Prabhupada. We have so many misunderstandings about ourselves, about this world, about God, and about the relationships between these things. We have so many misgivings. This chanting will help to cleanse the mind. Then you will understand that this chanting is not different from Krishna. Around January, some of his devotees from New York moved to San Francisco to establish another temple there. They invited Swamiji to inaugurate this temple, so Swamiji traveled there. So as the United Airlines jet transcended onto San Francisco Bay Area, Srila Prabhupada turned to his disciple Rancor and said, the buildings look like matchboxes. Incidentally, Rancor was his secretary who was assigned the task of traveling with Swamiji to San Francisco. So the buildings look like matchboxes. Just imagine how it looks from Krishna's viewpoint. That was what Prabhupada thought. Srila Prabhupada was 71 years old and this had been his first air trip. Only a few people in the crowd at San Francisco knew Swamiji. They were Mukunda and his wife Janaki, Ravindra Swarupa, Daya Rama. They were all from New York who had gone there. Srila Prabhupada was happy to be in another big Western city on behalf of his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Lord Chaitanya. The temple Mukunda and his friend had obtained was on Frederick Street in the Haight-Ashbury district. Like the temple at 26 2nd Avenue in New York, this was a small storefront with a display window facing the street. A sign over the window said, Sri Radha Krishna Temple. Mukunda and his friend had also rented a 3-room apartment for Swamiji on the 3rd floor of the adjoining building. It was a small, bare, run-down apartment facing the street. As the movement became famous, so some of the local newspapers would come to interview Swamiji, eager to know more about him and his mission. So one of the reporters' questions, I liked it, so I put it here. The reporter asked, what does one have to do to become a member of a movement? Prabhupada replied, there are 4 prerequisites. I do not allow my students to keep girlfriends. I prohibit all kinds of intoxicants, including coffee, tea, and cigarettes. I prohibit meat eating, and I prohibit my students from taking part in gambling. He was forthright and strict, no compromise. One day, Malati hurried into Srila Prabhupada's apartment, took a small item out of her shopping bag, and placed it on Prabhupada's desk for his inspection. What is this, Swamiji? She inquired. Prabhupada looked down and held a 3-inch wooden doll with a flat head, a black smiling face, and big round eyes. Srila Prabhupada immediately folded his palms and bowed his head, offering the little figures respect. We have brought Lord Jagannatha, the Lord of Universe, he said, smiling and bright-eyed. He is Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada beamed with pleasure, while Malati and others sat amazed at their good fortune of seeing Swamiji so pleased. Prabhupada explained that this was Lord Jagannatha, a deity of Krishna, worshipped all over India for thousands of years. Jagannatha, he said, is worshipped along with other deities, his brother Balarama and his sister Subhadra. Excitedly, Malati confirmed that there were other similar figures at Cost Plus, a local shop, the import store where she had found the little Jagannatha. And Srila Prabhupada said she should go back and buy them. Malati and told her husband, Shyamasundara, together they hurried back and brought the 2 other dolls in the set. Srila Prabhupada placed the smiling Jagannatha on the right. In the center, he placed the smallest figure, Subhadra, and the 3rd figure, Balarama. Prabhupada placed him next to Subhadra. As Prabhupada looked at them together on his desk, he asked if anyone knew how to carve. Shyam Sundara said he was a wood sculptor, and Prabhupada asked him to carve 3-foot-high copies of the little Jagannatha, Balarama, and Subhadra. Then he narrated them the entire story of Lord Jagannatha and how he came to be placed in Jagannath Puri in India. Shyam Sundara brought 3 large blocks of hard wood, and Prabhupada made a sketch and pointed out the number of details. Using the small statues, Shyam Sundara calculated ratios and new dimensions and began carving on the balcony of the apartment. Prabhupada set March 26, the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya, as a day for installing the deities. The devotees would have a big feast and begin worshipping Lord Jagannatha. Prabhupada said that they would build an altar, and he told them how to prepare it. Finally, the deities of Lord Jagannatha, Subhadra, and Baladeva were placed in the altar. With Balarama, Prabhupada discussed the urgent problem of obtaining a permanent visa. There always a problem with his visa because he had gone on a visitor's visa. Prabhupada had repeatedly extended his visa ever since he had entered the country in 1965. Now, immigration officials denied him any further extensions. He didn't want to leave the US, but the only way he could be able to stay was to get a permanent residency. He had applied for residency, but so far there was no success. Your government doesn't want me to stay, he said, so I may have to go back to India. So Brahmananda managed to find a lawyer to delay the proceedings of the immigration office. The threat of deportation passed because he was able to get an extension. Prabhupada spoke of going to Montreal and getting permanent residency there, but his main intention was to stay in America and cultivate what he had begun. There was some problem initially in New York when he was staying at 26th Avenue Road. There was one person by name Mr. Price who wanted him to show him a place for temple and residence for purchase, outright purchase. Swamiji, along with his disciple, visited the place and he liked it, and he gave advance to Mr. Price. Mr. Tyler was the landlord. Price was the intermediate person. Tyler was the landlord who wanted to sell the property to Swamiji. Mr. Price and Tyler, on some pretext or the other, delayed handing over the property and kept asking for more money. So Brahmananda talked to Prabhupada about the $6,000 they have lost to Mr. Price. Prabhupada insisted that they prosecute the culprits. He sent Brahmananda to speak to various lawyers and also tell Mr. Price and Tyler that His Excellency was back and would take them to court. When threatened, they relented. Mr. Tyler refunded most of the 5,000 deposit and Mr. Price returned 750 of the 1,000 he had wheeled out Brahmananda. The legal services had cost them more than $1,000, so that was lost. But Prabhupada said that when dealing with the tiger, you can expect to get scratched. Now let us cover that part where Swamiji is affected with health issues. During the last week of May 1967, Srila Prabhupada began to feel exhausted. He spoke of heart palpitations. Hoping that the symptoms would clear in a day or two, Kirtanananda requested Prabhupada to rest and see no visitors. But Prabhupada's condition became worse. So there are some interviews in the book. Kirtanananda said Swamiji began to complain that his left arm wasn't functioning properly. And then he began to develop a twitching in his left side. And his left arm would twitch uncontrollably. It seemed to pain him in some mysterious way, internally or psychologically. Achyutananda said, it was Sunday, 2 days before Memorial Day, and we had arranged a large program in the afternoon in a uptown town hall. I went up to Swamiji since all the devotees were ready. Swamiji was lying down and his face was pale. He said, feel my heart. And I felt a quivering vibration in his chest. I went down. I didn't want to alert everyone and panic them. I went to Kirtanananda and quietly said, the Swamiji is having some kind of mild heart palpitations. And immediately we both went upstairs. Swamiji said, just massage me here. So I rubbed him on the chest and he showed me how. The others and Achyutananda can stay here. If anything happens, he can call you. The others can go and organize the program in the hall. That's what he said. So others went and did the program, and I waited. That is, Achyutananda waited. Once or twice he called me in and had me quick rub over his chest. Then he looked up and his color had become black. I was staring with my mouth open, wondering what to do. He looked at me and said, why are you sitting idle? Chant Hare Krishna. During the evening, palpitations again occurred, and so I slept in the room next to his. And late at night, he called me again and had me massage. Kirtananda, it was Tuesday afternoon, Memorial Day. Memorial Day is a holiday in the US. And I was sitting with Swamiji in his room. While Kirtan was going on downstairs, the twitching began again. Swamiji's face began to tighten up. His eyes started rolling. Then all of a sudden, he threw himself back and I caught him. He was gasping, Hare Krishna. And then everything stopped. I thought it was last until his breathing started again. And with it, the chanting. But he didn't regain control over his body. Brahmananda. I was there along with Kirtanananda. It was on Memorial Day weekend. We couldn't understand what was wrong with Swamiji. He couldn't sit up. He was moaning and nobody knew what was happening. We nursed him, myself and Kirtanananda, trying all different things. I had to go out and buy a bedpan for him. Prabhupada's left side was paralyzed. He asked that a picture of his spiritual master be put on the wall in front of him. Thinking that Prabhupada was preparing to leave his body and wanted to meditate at the last moment on his spiritual master, Achyutananda taped it to the door facing Prabhupada. Devotees entered the front room of the apartment, and Prabhupada told them to chant Hare Krishna. Then he told them to pray to Krishna in his form of Narasimha. All his devotees in San Francisco and Montreal were continuously chanting and praying for Prabhupada to recover. Being Memorial Day holiday, his disciples found it hard to get a doctor. But after some search, they had got one. He diagnosed that Swamiji had a heart attack and needs immediate hospitalization. During the night in hospital, Srila Prabhupada's heart pained him. The next day, he remained in critical condition. He could speak but softly and was too exhausted to converse. Skeptical of the doctors, he diagnosed himself a heart attack affecting part of his brain, thus paralyzing the left side of his body. Massage, he said, was the cure. On the morning of June 1, other disciples joined Kirtanananda in Prabhupada's room, and by taking shifts, were able to give Prabhupada a constant massage. They took turns massaging his head, chest, and legs as he directed. This simple act drew each of them into an intimate relationship with him. When Prabhupada mentioned his preference for the Ayurveda medical treatment available in India, some of the devotees suggested they bring a doctor from India. After considering the expense, Prabhupada decided to send a letter first. Unable to sit or write, he slowly dictated a letter addressed to Sri Krishna Pandit, who had given him quarters for several years in his temple in Delhi. He wrote all the symptoms of his ailment in detail to Sri Krishna Pandit and gave him two options. The two options were: two things are to be done if it is possible, to send me proper medicines and directions. That will be nice. But if I require to return, that also I can do. Please try to reply as soon as possible in English because my students cannot read Hindi. So long as I am in bed, it is not possible to read letters. You can treat this letter very urgent. Consult necessary physicians and let me know what I am to do. In Mathura, there are undoubtedly many Ayurvedic physicians. I would have returned to India immediately, but the doctors say it is risky. If need be, I shall return soon as I get strength to take the strain of the journey. Sri Prabhupada, with slight improvement, expressed more disapproval of being in the hands of hospital personnel. He was still in hospital, but there was some slight improvement. This weren't able to do anything, he said. Krishna was in control. If Krishna wants to kill you, then no one can save you. But if Krishna wants to save you, then no one can kill you. Srila Prabhupada was eager to leave the hospital. For several days, he had wanted to go. They are simply sticking needles, he complained. And each day was putting his society into further debt. The devotees had rented a small seaside house in Long Branch, New Jersey, where Prabhupada could go to recuperate. Kirtanananda then decided Kirtana would be Prabhupada's cook, and Gaura Sundara and his wife Govinda Dasi were arriving from San Francisco to do the housekeeping and help. But the doctor wanted Prabhupada to stay for another brain wave test and more observation. The doctors and staff were insisting on carrying out more tests on Prabhupada, like X-ray, etc. But Prabhupada had enough of it and insisted of leaving the hospital. So against the wishes of the doctors and hospital, he and his disciple left the hospital and stayed at the small seaside rented place. Srila Prabhupada talked of going to India not only for his health. He told Kirtananda and Gaura Shandara he wanted to start in Vrindavana, an American house, a place where his American disciples could learn Vedic culture to help them preach all over the world. He also said he wanted to make some of his disciples, Kirtanananda, Brahmananda, Hayagreva, into sannyasis, and he would do that also in India. His real work, however, was in America, if he could just regain his health. Prabhupada stayed in Long Branch for 3 weeks. But when Sri Krishna Pandit wrote back saying that he couldn't arrange for an Ayurvedic doctor to come to America, Prabhupada began to think more seriously about going back to India. In India, he could get sunshine and Ayurvedic treatment, but his plans would vary from one day to another. San Francisco, sometimes Montreal, India, New York. He was deciding so many options. He told Kirtanananda to inform the devotees in San Francisco that if they held a Rath Yatra festival, he would come there. So at end of June, he returned to the original 26 2nd Avenue, New York place and went to the hospital for a checkup. The doctor was surprised at Swamiji's recovery and had no objection to his flying to San Francisco. So in search of sunny skies and eager to guide his followers in performing the first Rath Yatra, Prabhupada had airline tickets booked for himself and Kirtanananda to San Francisco, which he called New Jagannath Puri. He stayed in San Francisco with his devotees who adore him and were jubilant that he was back. He had come back to them again. That night, Prabhupada felt pain in his heart and couldn't sleep. He didn't rise early for translating. At 5 a.m., Kirtanananda came in and opened the window slightly so that Prabhupada could receive the soft ocean breeze. Prabhupada sat up in his bed chanting his japa and gazing at the feet of Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani. The next day was Rath Yatra, and Shyam Sundara and Mukunda, the first devotees to visit the devotees in San Francisco, were trying to do exactly as he had asked, like Jagadanda deities on the back of a truck and conducting an American-style Rath Yatra festival. He had even sketched a truck. Prabhupada had even sketched a truck with a 4-pillared canopy on the back of a decorated truck with flags, bells, and flower garlands. And he had called in Shyamasundara, make me this cart for Rath Yatra. Now ready and sitting outside the temple on Frederick Street was the cart, a yellow Hertz rental truck. This was the first Rath Yatra in San Francisco, which was a big hit with the community. After the visitors departed, the deities remained in the house with Prabhupada and his servants. Prabhupada felt satisfied that his disciples had successfully held a Rath Yatra festival. Although untrained, they were sincere. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Bhakti Vinoda Thakura would have been pleased to see the first American Rath Yatra. Prabhupada explained to the devotees gathered in his room that evening that only in the spiritual world there was freedom from anxiety, because his devotees were getting anxious about his health. Becoming free from all anxiety and returning to the spiritual world was the purpose of Krishna consciousness. And festivals like Rath Yatra made people conscious, Krishna conscious. Prabhupada had many ideas for festivals. If he had the money and the manpower, he said he could have festival every day. There was no limit to Krishna consciousness. This Rath Yatra festival was another sign of the good reception for Krishna consciousness in the West. Srila Prabhupada still talked of going to India. He had virtually made up his mind to go. The question now was when and whether by the western route via Japan or the eastern route via New York. The grey skies and unseasonable cool temperature of Stinton Beach were a disappointment. His health was still poor. He even spoke of dying. It didn't matter whether he died in America or Vrindavan, he said. If a Vaishnava dies in Vrindavana, the land where Krishna appeared, he is assured of joining Krishna in the spiritual world. To be always absorbed of thinking in Krishna was also Vrindavana. So if he were to pass away while preaching Krishna consciousness anywhere in the world, certainly he would still attain to the eternal Vrindavana in the spiritual style. Nevertheless, Prabhupada wanted to go to Vrindavana. It was the best place to die or to recuperate. Besides, he had a plan for bringing his disciple to Vrindavana for training. Prabhupada told Kirtanananda, Hayagriva, and others that he would take them with him and show them the sacred places of Krishna's pastimes. Prabhupada told Kirtanananda that he had definitely decided to go to India and via New York as soon as possible. So Kirtanananda packed Swamiji's things and drove Swamiji down to San Francisco to spend the night at the temple. They would leave the next morning. The temple and even Prabhupada's apartment were very hectic that night, with many devotees and guests wanting to see Prabhupada and dozens of people wanting initiation. The next morning, Prabhupada had to leave with his affectionate followers. Several cars filled with devotees accompanied him to the San Francisco airport. Prabhupada turned to his adoring followers gathered close around him at the boarding gate. Actually, I have only one desire, and whoever does this will please me very much. Now I have a temple in New York, in Montreal, and a temple in San Francisco. But I do not have any temple in Los Angeles. He told them to remain in Krishna consciousness and to please preach behind his back. They watched as he turned and walked through the gate, his cane in one hand, boarding pass in the other. Prabhupada telegraphed Sri Krishna Pandita that his arrival in Delhi would be on July 24 at 7:30 a.m. and that Krishna Pandit should prepare Prabhupada's quarters at the Chippivada temple in Delhi. In the telegram, Prabhupada mentioned his intention to consult a physician in Delhi and then go to Vrindavana. He was anxious to return to Vrindavana. Achyutananda told Prabhupada he wanted to go to Delhi, India to study intensively, gather experiences and become attached to Krishna. He had heard Prabhupada say that one would become more Krishna conscious in 2 days in Vrindavana than in 10 years in America. He asked Prabhupada, do you think I will be able to go? Achyutananda asked. Why not? Prabhupada replied. Accompanied by Kirtanananda, whose head was shaven and who wore a black woolen suit, Prabhupada reached Delhi at 2 a.m. via London and Moscow on July 25, 1967. There were a lot of people at Delhi airport who had come to receive their near and dear ones. But no one was there for Prabhupada. It was certainly different from the recent tearful airport scenes where Prabhupada had been with his loved ones in America. Now, instead of being surrounded by loving disciples, Prabhupada was besieged by taxi drivers and porters wanting to carry his luggage for a fee. In Hindi, Prabhupada asked one of the drivers to take them to Chippivada in Old Delhi. The driver put their luggage in the trunk and Prabhupada and his disciple climbed onto the back seat. They went to Chippivada and stayed at Radhakrishna temple. This is a room where I compiled Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada told Kirtanananda. I slept here and over here was my cooker and my typewriter. I would sleep and type and cook and type. Kirtanananda was shocked to think of Swamiji living here in such a poor, humble place. It wasn't even clean. Two Ayurvedic doctors came to see him as per his wish. They both agreed that the trouble was Swamiji's heart, but the danger was now past. They gave him medicines and advised him to keep to a regulated schedule of eating, resting, and working. Sri Krishna Pandit came to visit to sit and converse, and Prabhupada told him of his success in America and all of the young devotees in New York and San Francisco. In the afternoon, Prabhupada developed a cough. It didn't seem serious, and he said he wanted to travel the next day to Vrindavana. But by evening, the cough had become persistent. He couldn't resist. He couldn't rest. Kirtanananda tried massages and pills the Ayurvedic doctor had prescribed, but nothing worked. Prabhupada remained awake all night, and when Kirtanananda touched him in the morning, he was feverish. The doctors came again. Prabhupada's temperature was over 104 degrees centigrade. They gave herbal and Ayurvedic powders while Kirtananda looked at on skeptically. Because Prabhupada was having a lot of difficulty breathing when he lay down, Kirtananda thought it might be pneumonia. So Kirtananda gave him penicillin, of which he had bought a supply. In the afternoon, an elderly Sikh doctor who practiced Western medicine came by and gave Prabhupada an penicillin injection. Prabhupada fell asleep and rested quietly for the first time in 24 hours. The next day, Prabhupada's fever was down to 100.6. He was still sick, but he talked again of going to Vrindavana. So on August 1st, 1967, after 6 days in Delhi, Prabhupada went to Vrindavana. After Prabhupada had been in Vrindavana for only 1 day and his health had slightly improved, he immediately began planning to return to America. I am always thinking of you, he wrote to his devotees, whom he addressed as dear students. On Janmashtami Day, August 28, Sri Prabhupada awarded the Order of Sannyasa to Kirtanananda in a ceremony in the Radha Damodar temple. Kirtanananda thus became Srila Prabhupada's first disciple to become a sannyasi. Kirtanananda Swami he became. During the initiation, hundreds of visitors were present observing the birthday of Lord Krishna, and many of them came to congratulate the young sannyasi. Srila Prabhupada wrote, he will be going back to states very soon to begin preaching work with great vigor and success. Prabhupada still had issues with his health and needed regular massages and care, which Kirtanananda was giving. With regular medication and massages, rest and the heat of Vrindavana, Prabhupada felt himself recovering. By mid-September, he had declared himself 90% fit to return to the United States. He predicted that he would be back there by end of October. Prabhupada and Kirtanananda Swami and Achyutananda returned to the Chippewada temple in Delhi. Achyutananda had joined them from USA by then. For Prabhupada's two disciples, that is Kirtananda and Achyutananda, life at the Chippewada temple was hard. Delhi was blazing hot and lacked the charm of Vrindavana. Meanwhile, at Boston and New Mexico, his disciples were making new temples in rented place and writing to Swamiji about the progress. He expressed his desire to travel to Kolkata. So after a 24-hour journey, he along with Kirtanananda and Achyutananda reached Kolkata. Prabhupada was greeted at Kolkata Howrah station by relatives, mostly from his sister's family, and by devotees of the Goswami Mutt. About 50 people were on hand. They offered Prabhupada flower garlands and sandalwood paste, and then escorted him and his disciple into the car. His sister's name was Bhavatarini, but Prabhupada told his disciples to call her Pishima, her pet name, call her Pishima aunt. Prabhupada paid a visit to Keshava Maharaj, the god brother who had awarded him the sannyasa order in 1959. Srila Prabhupada had wanted to return to USA as a permanent resident from India again, but his students in America hadn't been able to get the necessary clearance from the US Immigration Department. Rather than wait indefinitely for US permanent residency, Prabhupada decided to apply for a visitor's visa. He went with Achyutananda to the US consulate in Harrington Road. Sitting before the secretary of the consulate, Prabhupada looked small and humble. I want a visa to see my students in America, he said softly. Do you have any letters? The secretary asked. Achyutananda handed over the letters from the temples in US. The secretary reviewed them and quickly gave Prabhupada a 4-month visitor's visa. While leaving the building, Prabhupada remarked, I will just get any visa and then it can be extended. On October 24, Prabhupada traveled with Achyutananda and Ramanuja to Navadvip, just to visit the Navadvip place. Prabhupada decided not to wait any longer on the chance that Mukunda from USA might secure him a permanent residency. I want to return to your country where there is good air and good water, he told Achyutananda one day. Every day we are receiving letters that the devotees want me there. I thought that in my absence they might deteriorate, but I am reluctant to even come to India. But now I see that that it is growing. The movement is growing. There is need for me to go and supervise the expansion. So I want to go back. The only impediment now it seemed was the P form. Like earlier, the first time even then the P form was a impediment. Now also it seemed that it was impediment. A clearance from the Bank of India required for an Indian citizen traveling abroad. His P form finally got cleared. Immediately he booked a passage on Pan American Airlines and sent a cable informing Mukunda that he would arrive in San Francisco on November 24 at 12:45 p.m. But again his departure was delayed, this time by a strike by the Communist Party in Kolkata. Businesses closed, cars, buses, rickshaws, and trains stopped running. Riots broke out. There were murders and assassinations. Meanwhile, Prabhupada remained at the Radha Govinda temple. He was now traveling back to America via Tokyo. Srila Prabhupada spent his stopover in Tokyo mostly in going to his hotel and checking into a room, bathing, resting, eating, and returning to the airport the next day in time for his flight to San Francisco. After a 10-hour flight, the plane landed in San Francisco. Standing with hundreds of other passengers, Prabhupada gradually made his way to the exit. He could see Govinda Dasi and others, few other disciples smiling and waving on the other side of the glass partition. In May, a few months after leaving Los Angeles, Swamiji paid a first visit to his ISKCON center in Boston. It was in Swamiji's room one day in Boston that he accepted the name Prabhupada. While his secretary was taking dictation, Prabhupada mentioned that the affix G was a third-class address. Then what do we call you, Swamiji? What should we call you? He asked. The spiritual master, Swamiji replied, is usually addressed by names like Gurudev, Vishnupada, or Prabhupada. May we call you Prabhupada? Yes, replied the Swamiji. At first, the disciples were reluctant to give up the long cherished Swamiji, which for them was a name of affection. But Prabhupada soon disappeared and he was affectionately referred to as Prabhupada always. Three married couples, Mukunda, Janaki, Shyamasundara and Malati, and Gurudasa and Yamuna, arrived in Montreal eager to travel to London. These three couples had begun the temple in San Francisco where they had close association with Srila Prabhupada. They had helped Prabhupada introduce Kirtan, Prasadam, and Rath Yatra among the hippies of Haight Ashbury in San Francisco. Now they were eager to help him introduce Krishna consciousness in London. Prabhupada asked the three couples to remain with him in Montreal for a week or two so that he would train them to perform Kirtan expertly. Chanting Hare Krishna was not a theatrical performance, but an act of devotion, properly conducted by pure devotees. Somewhere during his travel, while he was in Los Angeles in July 1970, he revealed his plans for establishing a governing body commission, GBC, to manage ISKCON. Then he dictated letters clearly mentioning how he wants ISKCON to function in his absence. He lists the names of 12 persons who shall form the GBC. Among them is one of our Guru Maharaj. Again, he drafted another significant statement naming several of his disciples as trustees of his Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, the BBT. BBT account will be used to publish my books and literature and to establish temples throughout the world. Specifically, 3 temples are to be established here. He wanted one each at Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Jagannath Puri. He also initiated the ISKCON Life Membership Program, where a membership fee of rupees 1,111 would entitle a member to many benefits such as copies of Srila Prabhupada's books and free accommodation in ISKCON centers around the world. And his enthusiasm to open temples all over the world and preach took him on extensive world tours, circling the globe 14 times, overcoming many challenges, his bodily challenges being one of them. Wherever he went, the reception was and response to Hare Krishna movement and lectures was phenomenal. We'll come to the Jew temple issues. In November 1971, the Mumbai devotees were living at the Akash Ganga address, which was 2 apartments on the 7th floor of a building in the heart of Bombay. But Prabhupada was not satisfied with this. He wanted land in Bombay to build on and to expand. He was determined, so instead of usual morning walks, he would take long rides in his car to observe various parts of the city. Because many of the ISKCON life members lived in aristocratic Malabar Hill, his disciples thought it a good place for a temple. But for one reason or the other, he judged them as all unacceptable. Then in November, Mr. Yan, his full name is not revealed, so only Yan is given to the name. In name, Yan offered to sell ISKCON 5 acres in Juhu, practically on the shore of the Arabian Sea. Prabhupada had trouble ever since he had first tried to purchase the land from Mr. Yan in 1971, and obstacles had plagued all his attempts for permission to build. This long, this long for acquisition of the ISKCON land in Juhu was a long drawn battle. Sri Prabhupada started his morning walk before dawn. Sri Prabhupada liked to walk at this time of the morning, and weather permitting, he would do so no matter where he was in the world. Juhu Beach, however, was one of his favorite places of walk. Prabhupada had trouble ever since he had first tried to purchase the land from Mr. Yan in 1971, and obstacles had plagued all his attempts to build permission to build. Now the triumph of installing the deities after he got the temple after a great fight for 3-4 years that battle went. In between, Mr. Yan passed away due to heart attack, but Mrs. Yan, his wife, continued the battle, and ultimately she surrendered the land. So after that, this is continued. Now the triumph of installing the deities Radha Rash Bihari is in one of the most gorgeous temples in all of India was near. Srila Prabhupada was continuing his worldwide travels and pushing his movement ahead on all fronts, yet he regularly returned to Bombay. Radha Rashbihari were still being worshipped in the temporary shelter the devotees had erected in 1971. On returning to the ISKCON property, Srila Prabhupada came before the deities and beheld once again their charming beauty that made him sometimes indicate that of all the deities, these were the dearest to him. His promise to Radha Rasvihari that he would build them a beautiful temple was soon to become a reality. But he sometimes expressed doubt as to whether he would live to see the complete temple. He was now 81 years and was bothered by certain persistent illness. Of course, the warnings of death were nothing new to Srila Prabhupada, as he had serious bouts of illness from the beginning of his preaching in the West in 1965. Yet, despite his frequent remarks about retiring, his disciples found it difficult to imagine. Srila Prabhupada's ill health persisted. The devotees did not think of Prabhupada's illness as a material way, but it caused them anxiety. Over the years, he had gone through various health crises, and the devotees knew these illnesses were transcendental, directly controlled by Krishna. In 1974, when he was very ill in Vrindavana, he had said that the cause of his disciples not strictly, when he was very ill, he had said that the cause was his disciples not strictly following the rules and principles of Krishna consciousness. His disciples knew that they had to strictly follow his orders if they were actually cared for his health. He would go on taking risks, accepting more disciples, traveling and preaching, but his disciples had to avoid acting in ways that would disturb his health. Mostly devotees preferred to think that Prabhupada's health would soon improve, but he himself did not dwell on the subject. He was too absorbed in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. On that day, one day in land of Mayapur, he said to his secretary, actually it does not matter even if I die immediately. I have given the basis of everything, and now if they simply manage things nicely and follow whatever programs I have given, then everything will be successful. The devotees in Mayapur felt Prabhupada was too ill to travel and that he should remain in Mayapur and recuperate. But reports from Bombay, where the temple was under construction, was conflicting. Surabhi Swami, knowing that Prabhupada's quarters weren't finished, wanted more time, so he wired Prabhupada not to come. But Giriraja and other devotees had been arranging lecture programs for Srila Prabhupada at a pandal in Azad Maidan in South Bombay. And Giriraja had invited Prabhupada. Sensing an opportunity for preaching, Prabhupada decided to go. On arrival in Bombay, he was so weak that he could not walk down the steep stairs of the airplane. And the airline personnel had to arrange him to be lowered to ground by a hydraulic lift. Once on the ground, several devotees assisted him in walking. Although he appeared frail, he smiled brightly when he saw the devotees waiting for him at the airport. September 6, 1977, in his frail condition, he toured London and the devotees there were shocked to see him in his bodily condition. weak and frail, and it was heart-rending experience for them. From London, Prabhupada was looking to visit America after Janmashtami, as he wanted to introduce Varnashrama at the ISKCON Pennsylvania farmhouse. But after Prabhupada was in London for 2 weeks, on the day of his appearance day celebration, his health suddenly became worse and his travel plans changed. Instead of going to USA, he now requested that he be taken to India and spoke of Bombay. If I leave for a few more days, he said, let me see the opening of the Bombay temple. It was still under construction, not ready. We can wait here and then fly to Bombay. I have worked so hard for the Bombay temple that if I see the opening and then die, it will be a very peaceful death. And if I still live, then I can come back here. So Srila Prabhupada went to Bombay, but his health was not improving and finally announced that he would rather return to Krishna Balarama in Vrindavan than continue staying in such critical condition in Bombay. I got still 2 more slides. We'll continue. I may take another 5 minutes more than the normal time. Please bear with me. On November 14, 1977 at 7:30 p.m. in his room at the Krishna Balarama Mandir in Vrindavana, Srila Prabhupada gave his final instruction by leaving his mortal world and going back to Godhead. His departure was exemplary because his whole life was exemplary. His departure marked the completion of a lifetime of pure devotion service to Krishna. A few days before the end, Srila Prabhupada had said he was instructing as far as he could, and his secretary had added, "You are the inspiration." Yes, Srila Prabhupada had replied, "That I shall do until the last breathing." Prabhupada's last breathing was glorious, not because of any last-minute mystical demonstration, but Srila Prabhupada he remained in perfect Krishna consciousness. At the time of his departure, therefore, he was teaching how to die by always depending on Krishna. Prabhupada's passing away was peaceful. Srila Prabhupada's departure was also perfect because he was chanting and hearing the holy names of God. Srila Prabhupada's life had been dedicated to spreading the holy name to every town and village, and for a month he had been surrounding himself with the holy name. For his passing away, he had especially wanted to fill the room with devotees chanting Hare Krishna, and Krishna fulfilled that wish. Srila Prabhupada therefore departed under the most favorable circumstances possible, in the most sacred place, Vrindavana, surrounded by Vaishnavas chanting the holy name. An ideal spiritual teacher, Acharya, always acts in such a way that others may follow his example. As Srimad Bhagavatam states, these great souls who cross over the ocean of birth and death by taking shelter of the boat of the lotus feet of Krishna miraculously leave the boat on this side for others to use. Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, by his perfect example, affords all conditioned souls the meaning for meeting the greatest of all dangers. An auspicious death is not merely a matter of psychological adjustment, so that one may die without regret or without becoming unduly upset. The real point is that at the time of death, the soul must leave the body and take its next birth. Only the Krishna conscious soul can leave this world of birth and death and attain an eternal blissful life in the spiritual world. Therefore, one's life is tested at death. Over the last months of his life in this world, Srila Prabhupada taught how it is possible to meet death step by step in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada came into this world on Krishna's request to teach us how to live a pure life of Krishna consciousness, and that includes how to finally pass away from this world to attain eternal life. Prabhupada underwent death in a way that was perfect and glorious, and at the same time in a way which we can all follow. When we have to go, we can cling on to the memory of how such a great soul left his body, always thinking of Krishna, surrounding himself with the medicine of chanting Hare Krishna, always desiring to hear about Krishna and practicing detachment from the misery of material condition. The final slide. This last lesson was one of the most wonderful and important instructions Srila Prabhupada gave us. He taught us by his life, by his books, and at the end by his dying. Education is how to die is meant especially for the human being. An animal dies and a human being also dies. But a human being is supposed to understand the process of going back to the spiritual world at the time of death, remaining always fixed and undisturbed in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada expertly taught the process. His passing away, therefore, was a perfect lesson and one that can be faithfully followed. On November 14, 1977, As the powerful news spread around the world, those who knew and loved Srila Prabhupada were gripped by a fearful, unrestricted grief. They saw everything around them in the overwhelming atmosphere of separation from Srila Prabhupada. They turned for solace to Srila Prabhupada's books. However, the disciples and the spiritual master are never separated, because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of Vani. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. So Prabhupada's disciples were already carrying out his instructions, but now they have to do so without the Vapu, without the opportunity of regularly seeing him and being with him. At first, this was very difficult for them to face, but those who were sincere soon really realized that Prabhupada had, upon his departure, given them the greatest gift of all, service in separation. Hare Krishna. With that, we end the session. I have taken a very small snippets out of the book. So you find them moving from one snippet to another. There are a lot of things that is mentioned in the book. It is very difficult for me to choose everything because it will take a lot of time. So I choose what I thought was very important. So I urge you to all to read the book, not only for the interview, even otherwise, because the book is really marvelous. We'll get to more information about Prabhupada, how he lived his life, what all sacrifices he did just for us, so that we can follow Krishna consciousness. He built such a big house like ISKCON for all of us to stay. Hare Krishna. If anybody's got anything to ask, anything to add, or anything to say, please unmute and you can go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you very much for the very beautiful session.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Anybody else got any other question? I'll stop the